Hi everyone, my name is Monique.
And I'm Naveen from Before You Play.
And welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Board Games, where we pretty much take a few games that we played recently and tell you how we feel about them.
Yes, so we have 6 games that we're going to talk about, all of kind of different varieties, different weights, different sizes, different game lengths.
Yes.
And in no particular order, we just wanted to go and rapid fire these.
Yes, and a majority of them are two-player only games, but the theme of this episode is games that play well at 2. So the other games that are higher player counts do play well at 2. Otherwise, today we're just going to go ahead and get straight into the games. Now, one thing that we want to mention is all of the games featured in today's episode were review copies that were sent to us by the publishers.
Yep.
All right, so the first game that we're going to be talking about today is the smallest game in physical size. And it is called Flip Circus.
Yep.
So it comes in this little baggie,
Pouch, yeah.
probably meant to be a travel game. But Flip Circus is a game designed by Julienne Gerard, and it is a two-player only game published by Aiello. And this is a deduction style game where the theme is that you are in a circus and there are 5 different performers and you're trying to gain their posters.
Yeah, you're trying to be the one to gather their posters.
Yes.
The first person to gather 3 posters is the winner.
Right. And so the game comes with 10 tokens, and they are double-sided. They each have a different performer on one side and a different performer on the other, or a clown. And so in this game, there are 5 different performers, but there are also 5 copies of clowns, sides. And at the start of the game, you're going to set up all of the tokens in a circle. Now, there are 3 copies of each of the 5 performers in the game. And your goal, in order to claim their poster, is you are trying to get all 3 copies of that performer together in a row, basically, side by side. Now, on your turn, you are required to take 2 actions. And there are 3 different types of actions that you can take, but you can take the same type of action twice. And so the first type is you can swap the places of 2 adjacent tokens. The second action is you can flip over one of the tokens to the opposite side. And the third action is you can use one of the instant abilities of one of the performers. So each performer has their own specific ability.
Yeah, like the acrobat, you can swing them across and swap the position of another character that's on the other side of the ring. The strongman has kind of an ongoing ability where you're not able to move them. There's also like a fortune teller, which you can see the other side of one of the adjacent tokens on either the left or right.
Secretly.
You can
secretly peek at them. There's also, I believe, the magician, where you can swap the place of the 2 tiles that are adjacent to the magician.
Yep.
So it's a lot of moving around of tiles and just trying to, you're basically trying to one-up your opponent because you're trying to be the first player to earn 3 posters. Now, you can also gain applause tokens, and these are these extra tokens that you can spend on your turn to take additional actions. And in order to do that, you basically need to bunch the clowns together. So if you're able to move 2 or more clowns in a group or add to that group, then it gains you these applause tokens. And that's really important because those extra actions can be the difference.
Yeah, and so this game has a big memory element also to it. So it is a deduction game, but there is a huge memory component. So if you're not a fan of memory games, this may not be one for you, but the fact that each clown, there's 5 clowns in the game and only 10 tokens total. Each clown has one specific unique character on the backside. So if you can position the clowns together to gain your applause tokens, that allows you to get more actions. But if you know what is on the other side of that clown token by maybe using the fortune teller, then now you have a little bit more information when you're trying to push and maneuver all these different tokens into place. You can lose your position, though, meaning like you can think that you know where a token is, and as things are getting switched around and moved, you can be completely wrong.
It's like the cup and ball game.
It is, yeah.
You're
so
shuffling.
the good thing is only 2 players, so Monique takes 2 actions, maybe a third with that applause token, then it comes back to me.
Right.
And so as long as I can keep everything in my head, it is pretty clever how you're trying to maneuver and position everything, but also keep into account all the various rules for each individual character or actor in the game.
Yes, and there is an additional win condition. They're performers.
Performers, there you go.
They're
not
circus
actors.
performers. And that is if both players have won 2 posters each, and you're basically just competing over the last one.
Sudden death, yeah.
Then you can either win by still getting that 3 in a row of that specific performer, by the way, or you can just have all 5 clowns face up. So it's interesting in that way that there is that sort of sudden death. But what did you think of the game?
Yeah, I actually really like this one. I'm not very good at this because about halfway through the game, things are like, that clown, I think that clown is the acrobat. Oh, but if I'm wrong, then I'm giving away information by flipping this over. And what I do appreciate about the game is there is kind of a gambling element on it where each token has a potential as to what's on the other side of it.
Oh, yes, that's true.
So you're not completely going into it blind. Like it could say strongman, and then it'll show 3 different icons on it saying it's one of these 3 on the other side of it. So if you can kind of track a little bit, then it makes things a little easier. I definitely can get a little bit flustered with not knowing exactly where everything is.
Yeah.
But I do enjoy the game and the gamesmanship aspect of it.
Yeah, this was a big surprise for me. It's called Flip Circus. I thought it was going to be a card game for some reason. I didn't realize when we pulled out the tokens, we were like, huh. They're tokens. And it comes in this little bag. It does say 20 minutes, and depending on how long
bad we are.
Yeah, or just how long it takes for you to kind of deduce things. Yeah. This can potentially not be a 20-minute game. I know for us, we play this game much longer because we both really stress out over our decisions. But I really loved it. I thought this was a really interesting game, and it's so small. You can take it anywhere.
This is a travel game, yeah.
Such a simple game, but the mind game in like trying to one up your opponent is really interesting.
Yeah, and sometimes you're restricted by like that strongman, and you're like, I know, I just need to get that token over there. So now I got to go the long way, or I got to get this thing flipped. But if I flip it and I don't have enough applause tokens, then I'm setting it up for my opponent. So how do I keep things away from them? Because we both know there's 3 acrobats right there. So I can't just give away my whole turn and give you the poster. So,
that is so true. Yeah. We could be in a position where we both know where the performers are. But because of the number of actions that you have, it's like, if I don't get this now on my turn, I'm leaving it so that Naveen can get the 3 in a row.
So how do I ruin this for you a little bit?
But also set it up so that I can get it on my next
your
turn.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting.
It's good. Yeah.
Really, really interesting little 2-player game. But anyway, that is Flip Circus.
There you go. All right, the next one is another 2-player only game from an indie publisher called Offcut Games. This one is called Expect Delays, designed by Patrick Brennan. And basically the theme of this game is you are transit operators and you're trying to get your passengers onto trains and to their final destinations.
Yes, I believe specifically the subway, because one player operates the downtown lines and the other player operates the uptown lines, which means both players have 2 lines each on their side of the board. And the board, by the way, is this box that you just kind of unfold, and that's the entire surface that you'll be playing on. And so the way the game works is you are just trying to be the first player to score 10 destination points, or the one who has the most destination points by the time the subway system breaks. Now, on your turn, you may take up to 2 actions. And in this game, I believe there are like 6 different types of actions. You can board one of your 3 commuters onto the start of one of your 2 lines by paying these fare tokens. You can run the line by playing train cards from your hand that match the color of your line. But the thing is, some of the train cards have multiple lines shown, which is one of your lines and one of your opponent's.
Right.
And if you're to play that card, then you're now running all the lines that are shown on the card. And whenever you run a line, you're moving all of the meeples that are on that line forward 1 space.
Yeah, and every move on their respective line is typically a higher value when they eventually disembark.
Yes, and that is another type of action. You can disembark by removing the meeple. They do not have to get to the very end of the line because there are point values along the line, and depending on where they are when you disembark the commuter, that's how many destination points you gain. And whenever you disembark a commuter, you also have the option of placing a white tourist meeple at the start of one of your opponent's lines, because the tourist meeples don't actually score you points, and you're required to run them straight through and off of your line in order to remove them.
Yeah, you can't disembark the tourists that you're basically placing as blockers on your opponent's lines.
Yeah.
They have to get all the way through, meaning you have to run your lines every single time to make room for your new commuters to come back in on that 0 starting space.
Exactly. Now, in order to get more fare tokens so that you can continue to board your commuters, you can take train cards out of service. And that basically removes the train card from the deck. And there's a certain amount of fare tokens that it'll gain you, and it shows that at the top right-hand corner.
It'll be like 1, 2, or 3.
Yeah, so if, for example, I have one of Naveen's lines in my hand, I could take it out of service so that if/when we need to reshuffle the deck, it does not get reshuffled in.
Yeah, so if I need the light blue line to really progress and Monique on her turn, wants to get both fair tokens so that she can put her commuters onto her respective lines, but also want to hurt me when it comes time for me to redraw, that I don't get the cards that I need to advance my lines. That's how you basically take them out. But you're not completely out of luck because there is a repair action, which you can then dig through the discard pile and basically put one back into the deck.
Yeah, that you're digging through the out of service pile and placing them into the discard pile so that when you go to reshuffle, it goes back into our hands. Now, the game also comes with these service advisory cards, which are basically either an ongoing event that happens or a new type of action or something that happens whenever you disembark a commuter from a specific point in your line. And anytime you need to reshuffle the deck, you'll have a new one of those come out. And so the last type of action gives you the ability to use that new action if that's the service advisory card that's in play.
Yeah, and they vary from different things. So as you start to cycle through the deck, then more of those service cards get out. So maybe you'll see something that is very unfavorable to your particular situation, or you see something that's really favorable, so you really don't want that deck to get shuffled. So there's a little bit of gaming that timing as to when that new service card comes in.
But you can't really control the timing because at the end of your turn, you always discard the rest of your hand and draw back up to 3.
I guess you're trying to find the most ideal time on your turn to actually use that card to your advantage.
Yes. If it's a new action, if it's a new action type, then sometimes they can be very, very valuable depending on your situation. But that is pretty much the entire game. It's very, very quick playing. You know, the box says 30 minutes, and that's probably about right.
Yeah, I think our plays were maybe even less than that.
Yeah, depending on how, I mean, the turns are really go quick because you can only take 2 actions, and if you're repair, you're not even using the train cards in your hand. You just discard them, and you did those 2 things. So turns are very quick. And like I was mentioning, you just play until somebody reaches 10 destination points or until the subway system breaks, which happens if you can not refill a player's hand after you reshuffle the deck. And that would happen if you just take a lot of cards out of service.
Yeah, and we played this game several times, and neither one of us felt like we got trounced. We were always like really close in score, like
and I think
one person 10, the other 9.
Yeah, and the subway never broke for us because I think we're both very cautious players. So anytime we would take our cards out of service, we would just repair them. You know?
Get them back in because you want to get your commuters to the highest value location before you disembark them, because you want the most bang for your buck on that particular action. But you're spending an action to progress, so it's kind of like you have to weigh your options. But in order to put that commuter back into service, you have to have fair tokens.
Right.
So then you are going to try to break the service. So it's kind of like this.
Yeah, it's
kind of
like a circular game, in the way that it plays.
Yeah.
Now, I was initially drawn to the game because of the way that it looks. Like the visual design of the box, the components is really well done. Like there are little details on the box too that give it that subway feel.
Nice
and
charm.
it can be like a travel game because it's all pretty self-enclosed. So other than that, the gameplay itself was very light. I mean, I didn't feel like I had too much control. There were some interesting things going for it, like the timing as to when to advance my lines versus when to board commuters. And depending on the service advisory cards, those also threw like a little bit of chaos, but just a tiny bit.
Yeah.
So other than that, it was very okay, I would say.
Yeah, this is like one of those ones where it's like, I don't really want to get into anything too deep, but I do want to play something somewhat mentally stimulating. But overall, its strategic depth really, for me, wasn't there. But it is very, very light, so it's kind of like, I wasn't sure what to expect from it.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of who the audience is. Maybe people who like the lighter games and maybe people who are interested in public transportation. I think there really are people out there who do take an interest in that.
Yeah.
So other than that, I did find some of the mechanics to be maybe a little exhausting. Like you shuffle the deck a lot. The train card deck is very small.
Yeah.
And, like I was mentioning, sometimes you don't use the train cards on your turn. So it's like I drew those cards and then I'm just going to discard them.
Yeah,
and
like you could take like one of the service cards that we talked about and do a repair, and you never use the 3 cards. Now you're discarding the 3 cards. And anytime you have to draw up and there's not enough to draw up, you shuffle all the cards again. And we found ourselves shuffling constantly, especially at the mid-game point when there's cards that are in play and also in that repair deck.
Yeah, but the biggest thing for me is I didn't feel like I had enough control to make my actions meaningful.
Well, there you go. That is Expect Delays.
All right, next up we have a game that plays with more than 2 players.
Finally.
It is called Magic Maze Tower. So this is a game designed by Casper Lap and published by Sit Down.
Sit Down.
And it plays up to 4 players. I think it plays solo. 1 to 4 players in about 30 minutes per session. And if you are not familiar with its predecessor, Magic Maze, that is a game that we both really enjoyed. It is still in our collection. That is a game that we got when it first came out, and we've enjoyed it so many times over the years.
Did we play it at Essen? One of the first years that we went to Essen? Is that when
Maybe.
I think so. We've
had it for a long time.
Scrolling the boots, and then we sat down at Sit Down, and we played Magic Maze and fell in love with it. Still in our collection on our shelf.
But it is controversial because Magic Maze is a real-time game where you need to get these heroes that are in a mall to find their weapons and then get them out of the mall.
Yeah, it's a real-time pressure game.
Yes.
You feel the pressure. Not this particular one.
No. Yeah,
but
the
original,
predecessor.
yeah.
And each player in that game, each player has their own directional arrows. So if I have the up arrow and the right arrow, I can only move the heroes in those directions. But there's a timer, it's real-time, and you cannot talk. So if I really need Naveen to move a hero, there's also this red pawn that I could slam on the table. So it can be anxiety-inducing. Now, this game kind of takes the lessons, I guess, that maybe they learned from people not liking Magic Maze,
aspect,
and changed some of the aspects of it. So in Magic Maze Tower, you have the same heroes that are trying to find their weapons and escape from different levels of this tower, but now it's not a real-time game. There's no timer, and depending on which level of difficulty you want to play, there are different levels of communication. So if you want to go with beginner mode, then you can talk freely. In addition, the original Magic Maze was sort of a system where you had a deck of tiles that would always change because you would always sort of build out the mall.
You never knew exactly how the things were going to kind of expand. But in this particular one, it's a specific...
Yes, this is an adventure system, I guess, where there are 15 different adventures that you basically solve. It's basically a puzzle now. It's not this like real-time cooperative thing. It's a cooperative puzzle.
Right.
And so in this game, each player also still has their own directional arrows that they have to move in. Of course, that depends on the number of players, but you're just solving the puzzle of that specific adventure. So each adventure will be either 4 tiles or 8 tiles, and you configure them in a specific way. So it is a bit solvable, but there are 15 of them. So I don't know if you'll really memorize the solutions here.
Yeah.
And each different type of hero can move in a specific way.
Yeah.
So as an example,
the dwarves, they have the ability to kind of slip under a specific type of door.
Yeah.
The elves can basically teleport over another character pawn, so another character can be in one space. If the elf is here, they can move orthogonally
I think that's the
over.
mage, the purple.
No, that is the one that can actually use those particular tile spaces.
Oh, yes, the purple piece can swap positions with a different pawn.
Yeah.
And then the strong hero.
There's like a stronger hero. I can't remember what
Brute?
the brute maybe. They can throw over these like spike pits.
Yes,
so
the
they
traps.
can help another character kind of catapult over a dangerous hazard.
Yes, and there is a new character in this game that wasn't in regular Magic Maze. That is a little sister. The little sister can move through sort of like teleportation, but every time the little sister moves, she has to be adjacent to another hero.
She's tethered to somebody at all times.
Because that's what little sisters do. They kind of follow you around.
You can't just leave her behind. Yeah, so this one, I just noticed as I'm holding the box here, it says no stress on the backs.
Yeah.
You see that?
No stress.
No
it's
stress,
like an X over the sand timer.
Yeah.
There's no sand timer. There's no do something pawn. You're not going to be doing that. This is like something that you can enjoy together as a family to just solve these puzzles.
Yeah, we played several of these, and we found ourselves enjoying it. At least I did. Yeah.
We didn't finish it all.
Yeah.
So I will say we did not finish them all. The quests or the adventures that have only 4 tiles are these big tiles, which I thought were cool because it's either 4 or 8. The regular adventures are like 8 small tiles, and then the large ones are these 4 tile scenarios.
Yeah.
And actually, the first time we played this game, we had demoed like an intro scenario, and it just felt so different from original Magic Maze that I thought, oh, I don't know if I'm going to like this at all because it felt less exciting. Like the reason why I like Magic Maze is honestly the stress of it.
Yeah.
We don't mind the real-time games, and we kind of think it's funny.
It's funny because we've introduced regular Magic Maze to several of our friends, and it feels like none of them enjoy it as much as the two of us
Maybe
do.
are we strange?
I guess so, but I wish I could get 3 or 4 people to actually enjoy it, because I do like the fact that in a 4-player game, you only control one direction.
Yeah, that's
true.
true.
In a 2-player game, I might control this direction and this direction.
Yeah,
So I have
that's true.
50% full control. But I actually want the stress to be put on everybody at the same time.
Yes.
And so this game kind of completely takes that away. So
Naveen wants people to be uncomfortable.
I like for what it is, yes.
Yes.
But
yeah, you always need all of the cardinal directions. So of course, the fewer players, the more directions you'll be controlling per player. But the thing that's interesting is we started playing through these. And the more I played it, the more I really, really liked it.
I liked it.
Because it's just a puzzle. I feel like I liked it definitely more than
you did more than I did. But I do like the fact that the characters' special abilities are absolutely necessary.
Yes.
It's not like I guess I can kind of use this elf to. It's like no. Part of the puzzle is you need to use it at that particular spot in order to set up the little sister to now be next to somebody to do X, Y, and Z.
Yes, because of the different abilities, some of these are very hard. Like you really do have to puzzle through them. And I'm the type of person who really loves like puzzly games.
That's true. Yeah.
Like I have a Switch, and on my Switch is just like a ton of just different types of like puzzly games, and that's kind of the type of game that this is. Yeah. So the more that I played it, the more like I was like, let's just play another one. Let's just keep going.
We did. I think
it's very addicting.
We hammered out like 4 or 5 scenarios
in a row.
In one setting. Yeah.
Yeah. So like I said, we haven't played through all 15, I think, that are in here, but this is definitely one that I'm going to play through in its entirety.
Yeah.
But there you go. If you did not enjoy the stress of regular Magic Maze, or maybe you want to play this with the whole family. It says 9 and up, but really you could probably get the kids in there and
depending
just
on
talk
how much
through
communication.
it. Yeah, do the beginner mode and just talk through everything, and it's a nice like logical puzzle that you can solve together. So there you go. That is Magic Maze Tower.
Okay, next game. This is a 2-player only game, a return to 2-player only, and we have Azul Duel.
Yes.
Designed by Michael Kiesling and published by Next Move. This is a 2-player exclusive game that is in the same vein as Azul, where you're going to be taking tiles and trying to place them onto your board so you can score points.
Yeah, we are in sort of a 2-player or a dual renaissance, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Every game, it seems like every game is getting a dual version. And so I was actually quite surprised when I saw Azul Duel, because the original Azul played pretty well at 2.
It plays well at all player counts, 2, 3, and 4, yeah.
And so they did make a lot of changes to the original Azul to fit the 2-player perspective. If you've never played Azul before, it is an abstract strategy game where you are taking tiles. I believe the theme
like Portuguese
is Portuguese tiles, right?
Yeah.
And you're trying to build your wall. Like the tiles are really beautiful.
Like a mosaic wall.
Like a mosaic wall, exactly. And there is a timing as to when the game ends. I believe it's when a player completes a row.
In regular Azul.
Yeah. So this game is different in a lot of ways. So in Azul Duel, it's 5 rounds. And, the original game, you had your board already laid out for you. In this game, you're also building out your board using these dome tiles. So each round, players go back and forth, either taking tiles from one of the factory tiles, just like in the original Azul, or taking a dome tile to place onto their board. So you're sort of building it out as you go.
Yeah, and the dome tiles are used they are eventually how you're going to get the tiles and score them onto your main board.
Yes, because at the end of the round, just like in original Azul, depending on which lines, I guess, on the left side of your board you're able to completely fill with the same colored tile, as long as you have a space for it in that row via those dome tiles, then you can move it over. If you don't have a space for it yet, then it stays.
Yeah, and these dome tiles are going to be multicolored, so if you need a blue one in a certain row, then you're going to want to draft that particular dome tile before your opponent, get it into the position that you want it, and then make sure you have enough time to get the tiles into that row to be completed so that you can then shift it over at the end of the round.
And there's a little bit more complication to the dome tiles that I'm going to get to in a second. As for the factory tiles, the way that you take those is the same, where you take all of one color from one factory circle. But now the factory tiles are split into a sun and a moon portion. And so if you're the first person to take from that factory tile, you'll take all of one color, and the other tiles that are left over, you stack in an order of your choosing on the moon section.
Yeah, unlike regular Azul, where if you draft something, everything goes to the center.
Yes.
And then you have to pick from the entire pool.
Yeah.
This one, you get to stack. So if it's like, I really want the red to be on top, you can determine red, then the yellow, then the kind of bluish color.
Yes.
Or something like that.
Yeah, so that you can kind of dictate the timing as to when the other tiles can be taken. And the other thing is, instead of taking all tiles of one color from the sun area of a factory tile, you can take all of the tiles from all of the moons of one color. So that is the other complication. And to add a third layer to that, There's also a larger factory tile where when you take the first player to take all of the tiles of one color from it, you don't get to stack them on the moon side. They all just get sort of laid out. It'll make sense if you kind of see a visual. Because if you do take all the tiles of one color from the moon sections, and that color tile also happens to be on that large factory tile moon, you're also required to take from there.
Yep.
And if you're the first person to take from the large factory moon, you have to take that first player chit, which scores you a negative point.
So if there's like 5 colors of the same type and you really want to get it into a row that only has 3 spaces, just like in regular Azul, you cannot split up those tiles into several different rows. They all have to go into one row at one time. So then you would have to put those into kind of your spillover, which again, you can get those negative points if you're familiar with regular Azul.
So a lot of those base rules are the same. Basically, the similarities are you're still building out a wall. You're still taking all of one color when you take from a factory tile. And when you place them on your board, they all have to be in the same line and all of the same color.
Yep.
And then there's the whole factory spillover. That's pretty much the extent of the similarities because now, like I was mentioning, it's 5 rounds. So there is no sort of looking at everybody's board to see when the game is going to end. You just play out the full 5 rounds. You also have these bonus tiles. Okay, so when the last tile of a moon section has been taken, it reveals a bonus chit. And each round, each player is going to take 2 of these bonus chits. So on your turn, one of the options is if there is a revealed one, then you can take it. And these bonus chits typically have 1 or 2 colors on them. So when you are in that portion of the round where you're moving tiles over, if, for example, I'm just 1 tile short of filling that line, I can take 2 of the bonus chits of that color, discard them, and it'll represent that last tile that I was missing.
Yeah, and the bonus chits are divided into like halves. So like one half could be like the red color, one half could be the blue color, or if you got lucky, you could have one that's the full color that you need. And so you're going to turn in those to represent that final token that you actually need to actually move it over to score.
Yes. So you either do 2 of the same color or you do 3 of any bonus chit. Now going back to the dome tiles. So each round, for the first 4 rounds, each player will be taking 2 dome tiles from the display and adding them to their board. And so in the 5th round, your whole board will be completely filled out already. So you won't be taking them.
Yeah, you start with 1 and then 2 times 4 for the first 4 rounds. And then there's not enough time at the 5th round to put a new one in and score it. So it makes sense why it's not in the 5th round.
Right. And you also want to have your board sort of built up at some point, right? You don't want it to be at the very end of the game. So when you go to take a dome tile from the display, you can either take one that's face up, in which it does not refill. So one player is definitely going to have to draw from the draw deck. And if you choose to draw from the draw deck, you can continue drawing to basically have your pick of the litter. But each time you continue to draw, you lose a point. And the reason why you're drawing more and more is not only because you want to find the colors so that you can move them over, but because the dome tiles have 2 special spaces on them. There's one wild space where you can, place any colored tile. So it does give you that flexibility. And then there's another kind of space that I don't remember what it's called.
It has like a tan just outline. Yeah.
And that is special because in order for you to fill that, you have to fill all of the 3 other spaces on that tile. And then it gets automatically filled, and you score the number of points equal to its row.
Yeah, so if you put it in the very top row, then you're only going to get 1 point. But if you can somehow manage to get that tan-looking thing
specific space
into the 6th row, then you're going to get the most amount of points for it.
But clearly it's harder. It's harder for you to fill that because each of those spaces needs like 5 tiles.
Yeah,
5 tiles,
exactly.
Right?
So it'd be one round you're doing 5, another round 5, and then maybe in the same round a 6, just to get that full thing filled to get the 6 points. Yeah.
Yes. And the last thing is there are also now end game scoring conditions. There are these cards that you can sort of mix up. They're double-sided, and they give you new goals to sort of meet. But that is pretty much the extent of Azul Duel. And if it sounds complicated, it's because it is.
It is more complicated than regular Azul, for sure. I do appreciate the element of the fact that you're not only just drafting the tiles, just like regular Azul. So in this one, as soon as one of those bonus tiles shows up, if you're not ready to draft some of the colors, because you can see what's stacked.
Yeah.
If I know, like, I need somebody to take this yellow, if I need Monique to take this yellow off so I can get access to that blue, maybe I'll take this less ideal bonus tile so that you can take the yellow and then I can eventually get the color that I really want. Or I can time when exactly I want to get the dome tile because maybe I need blue and I see all 3 of them in the display have blue out there. So it's like I don't need to pressure myself to get the first one. So I do appreciate the fact that there's other things to go for besides just the tiles.
And maybe that's what they were getting at with the further complications, because I feel like the commonality in duel type games is you want the decision of timing to be there.
So, you want it on your opponent to open it up for you.
Yeah, it becomes like, it's a duel. It's like, well, if he's going to do that, I'm going to do this. And that's sort of what duel games sort of get at.
Yep.
And that was kind of what was missing from the original Azul. Because in the original Azul, you're just taking tiles.
There's hate drafting, of course. Yeah.
There's hate drafting, but it really is just solely focused on taking tiles from the factory and trying to fill up your board. So it's a lot less complicated in thinking process as well, because you're not having to take into consideration like, well, what if I take that? Then if I don't take that, Naveen is going to organize the tiles so that I don't get the color that I need, because there are only 4 of that one color out on the table. And to be honest, the factory rules that are new to this game, it sounds complicated, but when you're doing it, it's actually more intuitive.
Yeah.
The thing that I found to be truly more complicated is the dome tiles. I felt like that layer was, I don't know if it was not necessary or it just didn't feel good to like, okay, well, now I have to take a dome tile. Like, I don't know what colors. I guess I'll just take these. You know what I mean? Like some of those decisions felt meaningless or just didn't feel as meaningful, I guess.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
The previous
because the colors are pretty abundant on there, and you're only competing with one other person for those same colors. So I don't feel that kind of pressure on the dome tiles. Like you can always make something work.
Yeah, and it just do I want to put that bonus spot on the 6th space? But I have no idea how this game is going to progress. I'm making this decision in round 1.
Yeah.
And who knows what it's going to look like in round 4.
Yeah, you're definitely not going to want to put one of those like in round 4 or 3 because there's just not enough time to actually get things over and then make sure that you're the one that's getting the tiles you need to score it.
Yeah, I just found myself, when taking the dome tiles, I just found myself wanting to just be the one who didn't have to draw from the deck. You know what I mean?
Yeah, why penalize yourself?
Why penalize yourself, exactly.
Yeah, the bonus tiles, I do appreciate that because the rows are actually longer. If you're familiar with regular Azul or original, the bottom row is 5 wide or 5 long, and this one, it is 6 long. So it's just that much more of a burden for you to try to get that thing to actually score in that 6th row. The dome tiles also, like I just always find myself just kind of shoving it to the top left corner because they're easier to fulfill.
Because you can place them anywhere.
You can place them anywhere, yeah.
Yeah, there's no rules as to where specifically on your board.
But then you have to be aware of the end game scoring cards. So if it's like, have a bunch of columns filled out, then you're like, well, clearly I want to stack them in a column to give myself the best chance starting off the game. I do appreciate like some of the elements of it, but I also kind of like the simplicity of regular Azul.
Yeah,
for some reason.
Yeah. I feel the exact same way. Like it definitely does some interesting things. Especially the way that the factory tiles work. I just feel like the original Azul was so elegant in its design, and I feel like that is what made it shine. The component quality, because everybody was very wowed by the tiles when it first came out, and the component quality in this game is not as good.
Not as good,
I will say. It is definitely not as good. But the biggest thing is the simplicity and the elegance in being able to just bring that game. You can introduce it to anybody. It's an abstract strategy game that I feel like it's hard for people to love abstract strategy games anyway.
That's a very popular one.
And that was a really popular one. Yeah. And I feel like this went in like the opposite direction almost.
That's fair.
Anyway, for you, what did you think in the end?
I'm like 50-50 mixed on it. Like there's elements I like, there's elements I don't. Do I like it better than regular Azul at 2 players? I don't think so. Yeah, definitely regular Azul, yeah.
For me, I felt like the more I played it, I started liking it less. The first time I played it, I was like, oh, these are interesting.
Decisions,
There's interesting decisions, especially in the way that you have to stack the tiles on the moon part. Complicated to teach to somebody who already knows the original Azul, but interesting nonetheless. And I do like those end game public scoring criteria that this game comes with. But in the end, it just really had diminishing returns, and I feel like this one's just not for me.
Well, there you go. That is Azul Duel.
All right, moving on, we have another Duel game, but this time it's a play off of the original Duel game. This is The Lord of the Rings Duel for Middle-earth.
There you go.
What a title.
You did it. Yeah.
This is a game designed by Antoine Bauza and Bruno Cathala, and it's published by Repos Productions. And if you're not familiar with the original Duel, what I was mentioning, is there is a game called Seven Wonders. Have you heard of it? And there was a duel version of that game that came out years ago before this explosion of duels. And that was just called Seven Wonders Duel. And I really, really enjoyed that game. I think
still
you do
on our
too.
shelf with
we
some
still
expansions,
have it.
yeah.
There is a implementation on Board Game Arena
Which is
if
good,
you don't want to have to pull out all the cards and make the stuff.
Yeah.
But I found that game to be a very, very good implementation.
That one is a
duel.
modern classic. Like it is a
Yes.
very good game.
Yes, and so recently they came out with the Lord of the Rings duel. So it's the same system, but Lord of the Rings, but also not, because there are a lot of differences with
There
this
are some
game.
changes, yeah, which is welcome.
Yeah, so if you're not familiar with the original Seven Wonders duel, it's a two-player only style game based off of the original Seven Wonders, which is a drafting game. But instead of the whole drafting and all that, you have 3 rounds where you have to build out these cards. And I know Naveen was never really a fan.
Probably
of
the
that
most
aspect.
frustrating part of this like genre of game
Yeah.
is building out that structure, but honestly, it's not so bad.
It's not that big of a
deal. Yeah. Yeah.
Especially when we played this
Yeah.
a few times, we're like, it's not that bad.
Yeah.
Come on. But I do wish that they had just placed the diagrams somewhere, because we always have to like open the rule book because it changes every round. Like one round, it's like the triangle. Another round, it's an upside down triangle.
The structure of how you lay out cards,
Yeah.
because some cards are going to be face up, some are going to be face down. So
Yes.
as you completely, it's in a lattice form. So as you take off cards, and they're going to flip up so that you can actually draft them on your turn.
Yes, and the way that the original one worked is, you go back and forth, and on your turn, you just take a card from this pyramid, and you add it to your tableau, or you do what it says. If it was like a warring card, then there's also this track that it's a tug of war track that you push-pull. There are these science tokens that you can gain that give you abilities sometimes, and that's another sort of sudden death element. So that was the thing that was unique about Seven Wonders Duel, as opposed to the original, were these sudden death elements, where on the conflict track, if you make it to the very end of the track, then that's one of the ways that the game immediately ends and one player wins.
Yeah, so it kind of forces you to diversify.
Yeah.
If you see somebody's getting out in front on one aspect, you have to pull them back.
Yes.
So that way they can't just end the game on you in the second
Right.
round.
The science tokens, if you are the first to gain all 6 in the middle of the game, that's another way you can immediately end. So you had to cover your bases. You didn't feel like you were ever safe. And if you ever got to the very end of the game, then it's by points.
Right.
So that was the original Seven Wonders duel. This game changes quite a bit of that. So now in the Lord of the Rings world, you still have that formation. On your turn, you're still taking a card, typically, from the display. But now there's also a board. So there is an area control element to the game that is sort of a sudden death thing. And by the way, one player plays as Sauron, and the other player plays as the Fellowship. So if you're familiar with the story of the Lord of the Rings, it is quite thematic in that way.
Yep.
There's also a track where the Fellowship is trying to get to Mount Doom.
Very
Is
good.
that what it's
Yeah,
called?
very good. Yeah.
I really like Lord of the Rings, but I'm terrible at remembering names.
She can't
and
make it through the
plot
whole
lines.
movie in
No,
one sitting.
I can't make it without asking questions.
Yeah.
So the Fellowship is trying to get to Mount Doom
Very
to throw
good.
the ring in Mount Doom.
That's it.
And if they do that, before they get caught by Sauron,
Just like the movies.
or by
The Nazgul.
the Nazgul, who are riding the horses, then they win.
They are, yeah. Uh-huh.
So there are some cards that you'll be drafting from this display. The ring. Anytime you see the ring symbol, you can progress up this track. But the thing that's interesting is there's a device that the game comes with where the Fellowship player never increases their distance from the Nazgul.
Right.
So there's a bit of an overlay.
So this overtakes the tug of war track.
Yes.
If you're familiar with regular Seven Wonders Duel.
Yeah.
So basically, there's a fixed kind of device where the Nazgul are always going to be the same exact distance, equidistant from Frodo, who's trying to get to Mount Doom. So if Monique drafts one of those blue ring cards and it says move twice, she's just going to move twice towards her end goal, but the
Yes.
Nazgul are still close. Now, if the Nazgul take that same card, though, they will slide 1, 2 closer,
Yeah.
shortening that gap forever.
Yes. So each time the Nazgul progresses, they close in. But each time the Fellowship progresses, they bring
They just
both of
drag
them
along. Yeah.
So that is new to this game as well. Otherwise, the way that you take cards, you typically have to pay a cost, and it is much more simplified in this version of the game. You're just paying coins or skill symbols. And skill symbols can be found on certain cards that you typically would consider to be resource cards in the original game. And for each symbol that you're missing, you just pay 1 coin. So it's much more simplified. Just like in the original game, you can also discard cards from the display to gain money if you need it. There are also the equivalent of the science tokens in this game, except it's different...
Like factions?
Factions, like the elves, the dwarves, and the humans, exactly. And if you're able to collect 2 of the same symbol, then you can draw 2 tokens from that specific faction stack and choose one of them to keep.
Yeah, and these things give you basically either a one-off ability or a forever ongoing ability. So one ability could be every time you play a yellow card, you gain an extra XYZ, whatever it may be. So you want to race to those. So as you see those come out, you want to try to get them. There's definitely... it's all public information. Once Monique has drafted a card and I know she has one of the bullhorns, I'm going to want to try to avoid or prevent her from getting the next one because she'll have a special ability that I don't want her to have.
And those are the main similarities between this game and the original Seven Wonders Duel. Now, the game also comes with this map, and no points, by the way, because in the original game, if you ever got to the very end, then whoever has the most points wins, but you don't score points in this game. There are only, I believe, 3 main ways to win.
So if Frodo gets to the end to Mount Doom...
Frodo or the Nazgul catches them.
Yeah,
it's the same sort
the track, if one player collects all 6 of the faction tokens is another way. Or if one player dominates the entire map and has presence in all 7 locations.
Yes. So the map sort of replaces the points because now there are cards, instead of gaining points, you can place out your units onto the map in specific locations. So you can't just place them anywhere. The cards will tell you one of 2 locations where you can place them.
Yeah, these are the red cards in the game. So they'll have like a flag that kind of corresponds to one of 2 locations. And so whenever you gather one of those cards, you get to choose exactly which one. So there's a nice little area control aspect of the game where you're going to be placing out your units, but then also later in the game, you have the ability to actually move those units.
Yes.
And anytime you move one of your units into a location with another player, then they're going to cancel each other out, basically taking them out of the game.
You have a battle.
Yeah.
So that's in the 3rd round. In the 3rd round, the special cards come out. And they give you the ability, like Naveen was mentioning, to move your units. And anytime you have several units in one area, you have to remove one piece at a time until only one player remains in that area. Now, there is also the ability to build towers, and that sort of represents the wonders that were in the original duel.
Right.
On your turn, instead of taking a card from the display or discarding it, you also have the option to build out one of these landmark tiles. And there is 1 landmark tile for each location on the map. And each one of these basically allows you to build out a tower on that specific location in addition to some other benefits. And they're very expensive. They usually require a string
ton of resources
of skill symbols. And you have to pay 1 coin for each tower you have already built on the board. So they become progressively more expensive as you build out more of these. But the thing that's nice about towers is they never go to battle. So if Naveen were to send a unit to an area that I have a tower built in, we don't remove
There's
pieces.
no clash.
It's a permanent piece that I have in that location.
Yeah, so she has a 1/7 of her need to control a certain area because, again, if you control all 7 areas or if you have presence in all 7, that's an instant win.
Yes.
So as the game kind of progresses, the map becomes very important. If you see that, hey, this Frodo Nazgul track, that's not really a thing, or we're blocking each other out on the green faction cards, then everything turns kind of to the map. Because if it goes to a tiebreaker, who has the most amount of presence on the map. So if it's 4-3, whoever has 4 wins.
Right. So meaning if you get to the very end of the game and nobody has won yet, then it's whoever has the most presence on the board wins. And that is essentially it for Lord of the Rings Duel. You know, there are a lot of similarities, but there are also a lot of new changes that are specific to the Lord of the Rings theme. So what are your thoughts?
So this one was, I want to say we put this on a list of anticipated games last year. I don't remember.
We saw it at Gen Con.
It was at like a first look Asmodee event. We saw it.
We saw a banner for it.
Somebody kind of gave us a really brief 30-second rundown. We knew the fact that it was going to be based off of Seven Wonders Duel, which we both really, really enjoy. And I enjoy the IP of Lord of the Rings. So I definitely wanted to play this game, and we finally got to play it. I like this one a lot. I think it does a lot of good things. And the thing that's nice about this compared to like Azul, like we talked about, is for me, I would always just play regular Azul. But this one, I can see myself playing both games exclusively and still having a good time because there's just quite enough change
When you
in
say
here.
both games, do you mean this and regular Seven Wonders Duel?
Correct, yeah.
Or regular Seven Wonders?
Well, regular Seven Wonders, you're not playing at 2-player, right? So
That's
I
true.
feel like
That is
that they are very different games
Yeah,
because
yeah.
regular Seven Wonders I want to play 4+ because of the drafting and
Yeah.
neighbor element of it. But yeah, so I think this and Seven Wonders Duel, I could play both of them and then feel like I'm having two different experiences. Yeah.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really liked it. I liked it for its simplicity, but also for the same sort of feeling that I get from the original Seven Wonders. I do feel like the tension is stronger in the original Seven Wonders Duel, but it's still here. And I really enjoy the map aspect. I like the fact that you're not just taking points, and then
Yeah.
just seeing who has the most points at the end.
Yeah, the map part is for me is the best part of the game.
And I think that that track where you're trying to go to Mount Doom is really well done.
Yeah, we've played several times and I've never won, but Monique has won in very unique ways every single time. So one time, the most recent time we played, I had all the control of the map, and it seemed like I was gonna win this game. And at the very last turn, she was able to put together some sort of combination to actually get to the Mount Doom and actually throw the ring in the fire, which was like, I think you also were feeling like you had to gamble a little bit.
It was my last ditch effort. You basically have to know
Yeah.
the different faction abilities. There's a sheet that comes with the game that's very, very, very helpful. And so if you know what some of them let you do, especially in the late game, because some of them are immediate abilities instead of ongoing, then it can really help you sort of at the very end when you need it the most.
Yeah, I felt semi-comfortable towards the end, but she was able to actually pull together some moves that made that game, like, by losing that game, I appreciated it even more.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Sometimes
those
like
moments.
just games like that.
Yeah, it definitely has those moments. And that's what I appreciate about both games. But I really like that this game is more approachable. You could definitely introduce this, I feel like, to anybody.
Probably, yeah.
Probably, right?
Yeah.
It's simpler than the original one, and I think it's a really interesting take artwork wise on Lord of the Rings.
Yep.
Because the artist is Vincent Dutrait, who is very, very well known in the industry. I've usually seen his work on like nature stuff, right? But he also does a lot of like human things, and so I thought it was really interesting to see his take on Lord of the Rings.
This is his color palette for sure.
Yeah. So anyway, that is it. This is another duel game. I'm sure you'll see more of these duel games as time goes on, and I'm very curious to know, do you like this renaissance of duel games? Do you want to see more? Do you want duel TI4?
Ooh,
you know what I mean?
that'd be cool.
And what are your takes on the duel games that we discussed today? Let us know in the comments down below. But that is Lord of the Rings Duel for Middle-earth.
Yep.
All right, the last game that we're going to be talking about today is by far the biggest in scope, and it is called Arcs. Conflict and Collapse in the Reach. This is a game designed by Cole Worley and published by Leader Games, and this is not a 2-player only game. This plays 2 to 4 players, but it plays really well at 2. So we figured we'd put it in this episode. Now, there is a lot to be said about this game, and we're probably, we're going to do our best to cover as much of how we feel about it in this episode, but we would love to know what your thoughts are, if you have any regarding this game. Now, if you've never played this game before, but maybe you're familiar with other Leader Games titles such as Root, this is a very different game. This is not a game of asymmetry where you're going to war. This is a game just about going to war, but in a very different way than you would think. There is a combination of trick-taking, but also action selection. There's a bit of area control. There's a lot of different things going on in this game.
There's a resource hoarding also in the game.
Resource management. There's all sorts of stuff going on. And so basically, the way that the game works is each player has a board, and there's a main board in the middle of the table. The board is divided into different sectors. Depending on player count, some of these sectors might be blocked off, especially in a 2-player game. And in each sector, there are planets that are, they belong to specific resource type. And each player has ships, cities, and starports, some of which will start on the board. Now, the game is played over the course of maximum 5 chapters, and chapters are considered rounds in this game, or until one player has reached a certain amount of power, which are the points in the game. And that's going to be depending on player count. In a 2-player game, I believe it's 33 power.
Yeah.
So if somebody reaches 33 power before the 5th chapter, then the game ends. Now, laid out on the right side of the board are 5 different ambitions, and they are the sole ways in which you're going to be scoring points or power in the game.
Yeah, so at the end of the chapter, if you enact one of those ambitions, then whoever is leading in that particular ambition will score those points.
Yes, and they're going to be stuff like whoever has the most amount of this specific resource symbol shown across their cards as well as on their resource tokens, or whoever captured the most amount of people or pieces in general by maybe going to battle, stuff like that. But like Naveen was mentioning, these ambitions need to be enacted. And so the way that a chapter works is players are going to have a hand of cards, and this is where the trick-taking element comes into play. Because in this game, there are only a few main types of actions, and these actions are specifically written on the cards. And just like a regular deck of cards, there are 4 suits, but each suit pertains to a specific combination of actions. And so the actions are going to be stuff like moving around the board with your ships, or taxing planets that you control, which allows you to gain these resources. And resources you store on your player board, and there's only a certain amount of storage space that you have on your board. There's also a guild card display, and you can influence by placing your meeples on a card that maybe you want to be able to take, but in order for you to take it, you have to secure it by having the most amount of meeples when you take that action, if that makes sense. And these guild cards are going to give you certain abilities. They're also going to contribute more of the resource symbols for scoring those ambitions.
Yeah, they'll typically have an icon symbol in the top left or top right corner that has one of those 5 different types. And so if that particular ambition is going to be scoring at the end of the chapter, then that would count as 1 towards that for you.
Now, you can also go to battle, which is a big part of the game.
Oh, yeah.
But it does entail rolling dice. And when you roll dice, it'll determine whether or not you remove people's pieces or their buildings sometimes, or even it'll give you the ability to steal things from their board, whether it's their guild cards or their resources. And I believe there's maybe like another action or so that I'm not capturing, but that is the main
securing the cards.
Oh, securing the
so
cards.
after you've placed one of your meeples on one of those cards and you actually have enough meeples compared to all your opponents, then you can take a secure action, which is a different type of card that you have to play in order to actually get that guild card into your possession. And then any players that have pieces on there become your prisoners.
Yes.
And that is another type of scoring criteria.
You capture them.
Capture them, yeah.
You capture them. You take their meeples and place them on your board.
They're
and
your
they're
political
now yours.
prisoners. Yeah.
Yes. But the one that I was missing was repair. You can take a repair action to repair your ships on the board that were maybe damaged from battle.
Or you can construct at starports. So there's a couple different things there.
So those are the main types of actions that you're going to be taking. However, the way that you actually take these actions is the trick-taking aspect. So whoever the first player is in a chapter will choose a card to play to lead.
Yeah,
basically.
So they have the initiative.
They have the initiative. They're going to choose a card from their hand, put it on the board, and they're leading with that card. Each card has a certain number of pips on them, and that basically tells you how many actions that you can take when you play that card. So the lower the value, the higher the number of pips. So if I play a card that has 3 pips, then I can take 3 actions of the type that suit allows me to take.
Yeah, so some of these cards have multi actions on them, so you get to kind of split and choose.
Yeah.
I'm going to do 1 move, I'm going to do 1 battle, I'm going to do this, that.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
It really depends on what the card says.
Right, and then once the player who led is finished taking all of their actions, then the next player goes, and they are required to either play a card of the same suit, but of higher value, and if so, then you get to take the number of actions based off the pips on your card. Or if you don't want to follow the suit, because maybe you don't want to take the actions that are of that suit, you can pivot and play literally any card number of a different suit. But you only get to take 1 action of that suit that you played.
Yep.
And the third option is maybe you do want to take one of the actions that were part of the lead suit, but you don't have that card in your hand. Then you can take any card in your hand and place it face down and take 1 action of the lead suit, if that makes sense. So that is a complication and the trick-taking aspect of the game.
Right.
And it's also the main restriction, as we'll talk about in a second. Now, whoever plays the highest valued card of the lead suit now becomes the new initiative player. And that player has a lot of control. So if you really, really want initiative, there's also an option for you to play 2 cards to steal the initiative, but now you're down a card.
You're down a whole
round.
action, yeah.
And everybody else is going to be basically taking an additional action over you that round. And so it is sort of important for you to be able to play high-valued cards when the time is right so that you can take that initiative without having to do the double card thing.
Right.
Now, as for those ambitions, at the end of the chapter, only 3 of them will be scoring.
At max.
At max.
Yeah.
And the players decide which 3. And so whoever leads a trick, we're going to call it, they can decide to declare an ambition. And when you do that, you actually place a token on your card, making your number a 0, which means you are basically not going to have initiative. You're sacrificing initiative in order to be able to declare one of the 3 scoring criteria for that round. But the ambition that you declared is on the card that you played.
Right.
So you also have to make sure you have the card in your hand that you want to declare.
Yeah, so if you know you're going to be a warmonger and you're going to be trying to collect trophies in battle, when you have initiative, you want to put a card into play that is going to have that collecting trophies, having the most trophies, so you can say, I want to declare at the end of this chapter, trophies is what we're competing over for the most amount of points.
Yes. And that is basically the game, honestly. There's a lot more to it in terms of when you're playing it, but that is the shell or the system that you're going to be playing with. Now, there is also one other main aspect, and it is the ability to take prelude actions. So when you gain these resource tokens, primarily by taxing the planets that you control, you're going to have these tokens on your board, and before you take a turn, you can spend those tokens to take their corresponding prelude action. And there's a chart on your board, and they basically allow you a little bit more flexibility. So like if I don't have a card that'll allow me to go to battle, maybe I have the resource token that gives me the prelude action to battle.
Right.
It's a big part of the game because obviously, as you can probably tell, you're going to be really restricted by the cards in your hand.
Your card draw, for sure.
So being able to take actions when you need to via these prelude actions is important. And there's another aspect to the game where if you go to battle with somebody and you destroy their city, then you provoke outrage and you are basically blocked from taking prelude actions for that specific resource type.
Yeah, so
the rest of the game.
If you destroy somebody's city specifically, then if whatever that planet type is, you are now no longer allowed to mess with those resources or those guild cards. So if you had some guild cards that are in like the psionic and you destroyed a psionic city, then you have to actually get rid of that card, that guild card. It goes into the discard pile. So you no longer have that. So you can never use them for prelude actions ever again.
Yes. So keep that in mind. But that is the main sort of gist of ARCs. Now, this game also comes with the Leaders in Lore expansion. I believe that it's part of the game. You don't play with it on your first game. Like, really don't do it.
Yeah.
But in the future, the more you play the game, you can add those in. And it sort of gives players an individual power as well as a, like, sort of a boon and a bane.
Yeah.
So there's something that's great, there's something that's bad, and then you also have a separate ability. And it just gives you some asymmetry.
A little more flavor.
A little bit more flavor, a little bit more flavor than just sort of the base game structure. So that is it. We were actually supposed to do a playthrough of this. We wanted to do...
It was voted on by our Patreon community.
Yes.
We played it several times.
Yeah.
And... I guess we're going to get into the review portion of the video.
Go for it, Naveen.
I was not a big fan of the game. We've played it many, many times, and every single time I found myself still not really enjoying it.
Yeah.
Because it is such, like, I enjoy Root, right? By the same designer, same publishing company. And that is a cutesy, but in your face game. It's cutesy.
It's cute.
But cutesy, but in your face war game.
Yeah.
And this one kind of carries the same art style. Still a war game, but the restrictive nature of those cards, that is probably the part for me that is the most frustrating in the game. When you have a hand of cards that just cannot usurp and actually get control, and you have to actually waste one of your action cards to be able to take initiative for potentially just one turn, and then you lose it again because you go to 0, and then now your cards are still the same cards. That was probably the most frustrating part of the game for me, and I just don't know if there's a way to remedy that without having like a draft of these cards, which would slog the game down.
Granted, in a 2-player game, I think there's a mulligan.
There is a mulligan in the 2-player.
But yes, you're still restricted by your cards. And I do think that the card play, which was the thing that we were most interested in.
It was, yeah.
By the way, is going to be the most polarizing for people. You're either going to love the game because you think that that aspect is super interesting, or you're going to hate it because you find it too limiting.
Yeah.
And so, oh my gosh, I think this is probably the most rage quittable game that Naveen has played in a while.
I've never actually rage quit it.
but you wanted to.
In the middle of the games, like, I was just finding myself like, I did 3 moves to get to this guild card.
Yeah.
And in one turn... gone. And it's like, that was 3-1 on my action economy. That kind of stinks.
Yeah.
Or like, if you don't have the right cards and now you're playing a card face down, maybe you got 3 action or 4 action points out of it, but I only got 1. And in a game where it's like you need actions to take actions, that kind of stinks.
Especially for people who are Euro gamers through and through, I feel like it's easy to sort of get hung up on the actions on the cards. And I'm not saying that you're wrong. Yeah. We're a little bit split on this game.
I think you like it more than I do.
I liked it more, for sure. I think the system is really interesting because that's what it is. It's a system. It really depends on what the people are doing around the table. And granted, I think it would have been better if we played the game at 3. Because the 2-player game is brutal. It's brutal. It's the game of just like, how can I undo what you did? Or like,
we have played this at 3, though.
We have played it at 3, but it was a learning game.
It was a learning game, that's true.
I feel like at higher player counts, you can really get sneakier and sort of come up from behind. Whereas in a 2-player game, you're just in each other's faces.
Yeah.
And it's really easy to think like, well, I just need to go to battle a bunch. I just need to decimate them. But that's not the point. The point is which ambitions are actually going to score. You need to do that. Because maybe you completely decimate me off the board, but if I have all the resources and those are all of the ambitions that are scoring, then I'm going to win.
So the thing that's also frustrating, though, is you might be in a position where it's like, I got all the psionic ops right here.
Yeah.
I have all of it, whatever that resource is.
Yeah.
I'm golden for this. Here's my hand of cards. None of them have that ambition on my cards. So I have to hold on to it for a whole other round to hope that my next draw, they will be on my cards.
Or spend them.
Or spend them, but then now you've grinded to,
Or you see what ambition I'm trying to score. It's a complicated game in strategy, for sure.
Yeah.
Like, it rewards you for playing it more. Like, you definitely want to play a lot of it to really get a handle of it. But
you
if you're not,
get better as you play, for sure. Yeah.
But to Naveen's point, if you're not enjoying your plays every single time, then it's sort of moot, right? So this is a point of contention for sure. I wanted to play it more. I actually wanted to play the campaign because that was why I wanted to play it in the first place. I heard that the campaign was amazing. So we haven't been able to play the campaign. If I'm able to play it somehow with somebody, because Naveen is not going to want to do it.
I'm not going to do it.
Then I'll talk about it in the future. I won't make you sit through it.
Yeah.
But I do think that the leaders in lore make it interesting. They're silly.
I do like them.
It's such a silly game.
That part is better.
You spend so much time in this game feeling awful. Like, even if I think the game is interesting, I still feel frustrated. It's a very frustrating experience. But just that, like, trying to be clever with your cards, I think people do find that to be really interesting. And if you're on the winning end of the game, then you're like, haha, you're much...
My dice roll was better than the defense that were already printed on the dice.
Okay. I will say, the dice rolling is sort of atrocious. Like, the fact that everything is like, you got to figure it all out. But when you go to battle, you roll dice to determine the victor, to determine whether or not somebody can steal from you. That I think was a bit not too great.
It's nice to have the simplicity of the dice. So basically, when you go to battle as the aggressor, you get to choose one of 3 different dice types. And so, like, the orange ones have these keys, which if you attack like a city, then or a city or starport, I think, I can't remember now. At least if you attack another player's buildings, then you can steal their resources, which is either the guild cards or their actual tokens that are locked in.
And make them furious.
Yeah. So each guild card has a set of like keys on it, as well as the different tokens that you place on your board. And so if a player rolls a certain amount of keys, then they can actually basically rummage through your stuff and say, "Ooh, we're scoring a psyops this time. I'm gonna take your psyops." And so then that just shifts the balance, and all your grind is just gone. And so I know everybody can do it to each other. I think one of the most frustrating things is when you're in a position to maybe battle. You're like, I'm good to battle here.
Yeah, you're strong.
But I have no move card, so I can't get into position. I don't have the resource to actually get myself to move. Oh gosh, I was really hoping I could move so I could battle. Or I have to just play one face down, and it's like, now I can only do a single battle. I really need to do a double battle, a triple battle. So that's the part that gets like really, really frustrating for me, is just the inability to kind of control some of your actions.
Yeah. And I mean, that is a fact. You do have an inability to control your actions here.
I think the final thing for me, though, is you have to reprocess after every single decision that's been made in the game.
That is true.
There's no like, on turn 1, I will move. On turn 2, I will battle. And on turn 3, I will make sure I secure that card.
Yeah.
Things are going to change, and you're like, oh, you didn't play the move, so I can't. Okay, so I'm not going to move. So then now I got to reassess.
Yeah.
And every single time somebody takes an action and changes the board state, you're constantly having to reassess,
Yes.
which is good for a strategy game, right? Like you want to have that kind of tension, but found that it elongated the game unless somebody just clobbered with points.
Yes. And I don't know if that's maybe a Eurogamer's mentality as well, because we're used to like, I'm going to plan out 4 moves from now and like build out this big engine or whatever. In this game, like Naveen was mentioning, you have to plan out every turn when it comes back to you.
You have to truly roll with the punches.
So long. The first game is so long, and we play long games.
Yeah.
But it's like when somebody else is deciding, you're like, I can't even think about my turn
because
I don't know what they're going to do.
If you're going to put an extra meeple on that card I'm trying to secure, then we're going to be tied.
Yeah.
That was going to be my next move. Now I guess you're doing that, so now I have to figure something else out.
So that can be rough. But if you like a game with tension, this game has tension.
Ton of it.
All throughout.
Right
like,
when you start.
This is the game of tension. We name it tension, basically.
So anyway, for me, I personally am not a fan of the game, but I can absolutely see people liking this game that like these kind of things. So if every negative that you kind of heard me say is something that you're like, I can roll with that, that's fine. Then I do still recommend you try the game so you can find out for yourself. And this is probably one of those ones that give it 2 shots. Because I
give it 3.
Because on first play I was like, okay, wow, I really am not liking it. Second and third play I'm like, okay, I can see like why people would like it, but it's still not for me.
Right.
You know.
So suffice it to say, we are not going to be doing a playthrough of this. Our Patreon community actually was like, if you don't like it, don't
They understood,
do it.
which is nice.
They're very understanding, and I really appreciate them for that because it would have been really kind of terrible, I think, on camera. But for me, I think the game is really, really interesting. I don't necessarily know that I enjoy it, honestly. Like, I don't know that I would pick this game over other games that I just really love. I love
Root. I would absolutely play Root.
It's really unfair to compare this game to Root. They are so different, but I absolutely adore Root. And that game also took me time to love. The first time I played Root, I hated it. And then after I played a few times...
Talking about Root, that's a game where there's so much asymmetry that on your first game, if you only know your faction, you're going to probably play into other people's strategies accidentally.
Especially if you play with people who know the game.
Yeah.
But, after a few times playing Root, that is like in my top 10. Like, I love that game so much. So these are completely different games. And like Naveen was saying, I completely agree. Even if this doesn't sound like a game for you, or if it does, you are not going to know if you're going to like the game based off of what we say. Because I hear so many people who say, like, this is a game that really didn't sound like it was for me, but I love it. And then the opposite. This is a game that I thought we would love because it has the trick-taking, it has clever card play, this and that, and look where we are.
I think I just didn't realize that the trick-taking was going to be so restrictive. And then once I discovered that, then that was the part that just kind of soured it for me. But anyway, that is Arcs. If you are a fan or not a fan of this game, that I am very interested to see in the comments. So please let us know if you have played Arcs, and also if you have played the campaign. We've heard that the campaign just takes the game to a different level. So
I've read the rules.
Yeah, push Monique into that direction to play with somebody else.
Very silly, and I'm all in for the silly.
So that is Arcs.
Well, there you have it. That is a few games that play well at 2, and we covered quite a few of them today.
6.
We've been slowly sort of trying to catch up on our backlog because of the large break that we had to take at the start of the year. So thank you all for joining us on that. As usual, we would love to hear what you all have been playing. I, by the way, have been watching some anime. I rarely get to talk about it. So I feel like there's some crossover between the anime and community and the board gaming community. So if you watch anime, please let me know what you've been watching, because I'm sort of in this, like, I'm really into it right now.
She's ready to soak up some shows.
I'm ready to soak up more shows. If you haven't seen Dun Da Dun, not for a first-time anime viewer, it's very weird, but very, very good. Free Run, for anybody who wants like a slower-paced sort of anime, is something that I've been enjoying as well. But let me know what you've been watching and what you've been playing.
Thank you all so much for watching the video. We hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to see more videos like this in the future, please consider subscribing.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.